last 11 years, the Hungarian government pursued the same position that they protected the borders of Hungary with physical barriers, legal barriers, and very strong police, and if it was necessary, military presence along the border. So actually, the number of illegal immigrants in Hungary, it's almost zero.
I want to ask about this new deal that's signed between the European Union and India. What implications does this have when it comes to immigration from India to the EU?
Yes, first of all, it's important to underline that actually it's a free trade agreement with different sectors. So migration is only a small part of the deal, but human mobility is also the part of more or less all of these agreements, which is conducted by the European Union. So actually the aim of the mobility part of the treaty, which is of course about migration, to make possible for skilled Indian laborers and students to come to the EU member states and work or study there. Of course, there are legal pathways nowadays as well, but it broadened the possibilities. For example, increase the number of Indian students who can study in European universities. It will shorten the time of visa procedures and provide more space for the acceptance of, for example, a different degree of Indian people in the European context.
And do you expect that a lot of Indians are going to come to Europe as a result of this deal?
To tell you this truth, first of all, it's just a frame. Okay, so the EU cannot import Indian labor. So only the individual member states and the companies who can facilitate the coming of skilled laborers or students. So, and it's very important that the details of the agreement will be, arranged just in the coming months, and both the Parliament and the Council of the European Union has also some voice about the acceptance of the final deal. In general, it's still an open question because, of course, during the ceremony, Ursula von der Leyen emphasized the possibility of more mobility between the two parties, and of course, it's mainly the Indians who want to come to the European Union. But it's the part of the bigger deal because actually one of the main driver of the whole agreement was the German big companies who wanted to reach tax reduction. For example, the car makers who want to sell more cars, European cars in India. And, for this, for the abolition of the tariffs, the EU, the Indian tariffs, the EU had to offer something. So it's, as I mentioned, it's still an open question. And in many cases, in the hand in the individual member states, not the European Union.
Do you think that member states like Hungary will try and block this deal because of the implications on migration?
It's a good question. Perhaps yes, but for example, because the many Hungarian companies are connected to the German car makers, perhaps they will not. And because Hungary can decide whether it's open its labor market for the Indian laborers or not, I don't think a veto will be used by, for example, the Hungarian government. The big question is whether the certain member states consider such kind of open border policy for Indian immigrants as like the United States under the previous administration did it with the H-1B visas. Because of course, the general mantra is that the EU needs a lot of skilled laborers for the IT, the engineering, the pharmacy sectors, etc., etc., etc. But the experiences of the United States are that in many cases, people who are arriving have the same skills as the American laborers. The big issue is that they ready to take that job for two-thirds of the same salary. So in many aspects, the deal was pressed by the big European companies, as it was previously in the case of H-1B visas for big American companies. So it's it's mainly a debate between not the European Union and perhaps the member states, but the will of certain governments and big multinational companies within the European Union.
What about the cultural impact of importing Indians into Europe? Are you concerned about how that might impact a country like Hungary or other places?
Of course, it's always a big question because, there is a sentence, one of my colleagues, Ralph Schellhammer in MCC, that small migration is like the salt. For the soup, you need some salt to have its taste. But if there are too much salt in the soup, it can cause a lot of problems. So, and, there are not too big Indian diaspora communities in India, contrary to the UK, for example. Even in Hungary, there are a couple of thousands Indian guest workers who are in general hardworking, and most of the factories and the employers are satisfied with them. But it's always the question if, let's take the example of Hungary, if not thousands, but tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of Indians coming, it's a very different story. And we have to underline also that India is one of the most populous nation, one of the biggest nation with a huge Muslim community as well. So, and there's no distinction in this agreement between the Hindu Indians and the Muslim Indians. And if you're looking around in Europe, for example, in the UK, it can easily import tensions and old grievances to our societies, what happened in Leicester a couple of years ago in the UK. So yeah, definitely it's a risk. And last but not least, we had to raise the question about proper vetting. It's always a question when thousands, tens of thousands of people would like to come to the European Union, whether the individual member states have the capacity, to check properly of them. Because we have to keep in our mind that because of historical reasons, terrorism is a real threat in India as well.
Moving on from this India-EU deal, how do you think the European Union is handling the issue of illegal migration? And what do you make of this Spanish government's decision to hand out documents to hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants?
Actually, 500,000, yeah. Yeah, it's a possibility, if you can't solve a problem, then you just rename it, So what happened here is, just forget the illegal term and using the legal term, So it's a challenge, and, MCC and the Migration Research Institute, we just published a report 2 weeks ago titled Taking Back Control, that it's clear that the European Union and its institutions couldn't cope with the migration crisis all around Europe. And it's not only about illegal migration, but also legal migration, just thinking about family reunification or actually student visas. Because, one of my problem with this very broad agreement, and of course we'll see how the details will be organized, that in many cases student visas are utilized only for people to get in to EU member states. They never finish their studies, just utilizing to be here, and it's very complicated to deport them. So this is why legal immigration can cause also a lot of problem. And I would like to mention one more issue. It's about the European labor market, because the general mantra is that by some pro-immigrant group and even by some EU institutions, Commission experts, EU Commission experts, that the EU needs 1 million extra immigrant labor force annually. But if we have a look on the current numbers, so there are 260 million EU citizens between the age of 16 and 64, so the active population. And currently about 200 million of them are working. 12 million are seeking for a job. And there are almost 50 million European citizens out of the labor market, which means that they are not seeking jobs. They are, as I mentioned, out of the labor market, which of course there are university students among them, early retirement people, other persons with serious healthcare issues, but there are millions, if not tens of millions of people who has all the capacity to work, but somehow they fell out from the the labor market. So for me, it's a big question that instead of importing millions of people to Europe to solve the labor market issues and the employment challenges, perhaps the EU and the member states should focus on these 50 million people to find the portion which can be mobilized, and it's not mission impossible, In Hungary, in 2010, for a population of 10 million, only 3.6 million people were active in the labor market. And 15 years later, this number is 4.6 million. So 1 more million people were mobilized thanks to different government initiatives. So this means that the challenges of the labor market can be solved only by importing immigrants. It's simply false.
What about the EU's attempts to try and tackle illegal migration in southern Europe? Is that being more successful right now in 2026 than in previous years?
Well, I think what is a success that finally both EU institutions and actually all member states accepted and confessed that there is a crisis. So it's important because even 10 years ago, everybody considered it, or many actors considered it just a one-time show. We have to open our borders for poor refugees, etc., etc. Now the discourse is shifting. People are decision makers, more and more experts, started to confess now that it's a serious crisis. Most of the people who are arriving irregularly are illegal migrants. They are not refugees, not escaping from war and persecution. They just want to enjoy the green pastures of Europe. So this shift is very important. But still in the media, in pro-immigrants group, pro-immigrant governments, it seems that what they are providing and the policy steps, what they are doing is not enough. It's clear in the new Migration and Asylum Pact of the European Union, which was accepted by the overwhelming majority of the member states with the resistance of Hungary and Poland, which will not solve this crisis, which I'm very skeptical whether will faster deportation. And under the current legal frameworks and under the new framework of the pact, actually anybody who will reach the external borders of the European Union and she or he will tell that I would like to apply for asylum, it will be a freeway ticket into the territory of the European Union, and it would be super complicated to deport them, as it's the case now, okay? Because the deportation and repatriation rate in the EU level is below 20%, including voluntary repatriation. So, and I don't see that the new pact will change anything in this context.
How have individual governments handled migration? Are you happy with, for example, Meloni in Italy versus what's going on in Spain right now?
I think more or less yes, because it's Italians under constant pressure. So, and the current Meloni government has a very strong position to stop illegal immigration. And what was more important that the Italians was and still they are who are trying with these so-called innovative solutions, actually the externalization of asylum procedures and the establishment of return hubs because of the activism of the courts. The original plan with these Albanian centers to use them for processing certain people actually failed. So now the government would like to use them as return hubs. So these are, I think, the core stones and the new initiatives of the government in Rome. But we have to be realistic, still the Meloni government under constant political and sometimes ideological pressure by the courts and certain political groups in Italy. So they are very cautious. So if I should name some countries which I think serves a model for other countries, I think it's not Italy, but for example, Denmark, which has a very tough migration policy. And if I should mention other countries, for example, we can see a 180-degree turn in the Swedish immigration policy. Now the Swedish government offering money equivalent to 30,000 euro for persons, or more than $30,000 for persons, for accepted asylum seekers to go home, because the cost of them to launch successful or not successful integration procedure in Sweden costs tremendous money.
What about Hungary? How is Hungary handling migration? Is Hungary having an increase in illegal migration? What's going on?
Yeah, in the last 11 years, the Hungarian government pursued the same position, that they protected the borders of Hungary with physical barriers, legal barriers, and very strong police, and if it was necessary, military presence along the border. So actually, the number of illegal immigrants in Hungary is almost zero. In the last 1.5 years, we can see a sharp decline in the arrivals in the southern border. So in 2022, it was the peak, of course, just after the 2015 crisis when 400,000 people arrived. So 2022, almost 300,000 people tried to cross the Hungarian border. The next year, 170,000. But at the end of 23, the Hungarian government made a deal with Serbia, and the Serbian police deployed huge forces in the northern borders of Serbia to fight against illegal networks, criminal networks. Actually, it was necessary by the Serbians, because actually there was regular shootings and fight between the different organized criminal gangs, caused mainly from Afghan nationals. So it led to a sharp decline in the number. So last year, the number of irregular border crossing attempts were around 15,000. This year, I think we can see also a daily 50 or 60 people try to cross the border. So now the situation is a little bit better, but it doesn't mean that the problem is over, because we see that a lot of people who previously tried to cross the Serbian-Hungarian border now going to the Serbian-Bosnia-Herzegovina border and then Croatia, and others try to go to Bulgaria or Romania and then to Hungary.
And do you have any advice for the British government as it's handling its own illegal migration problem? How can Britain learn from Hungary?
The first is about border protection, and I know that the UK has a very different situation because it has a sea border, but it's the protection of the British territory doesn't start at the cliffs of Dover. So the deployment of the Coast Guard, or even if it's necessary, Navy, along the channel, I think it could be a solution. And the other is the message. So we can see in the immigration situation in the United States by Donald Trump, and whether we like it or not, it was a clear message that we don't want illegal migrants and we will deport them. And it was effective. So we can see a more than 90% decline in illegal border crossing in southwest border of the United States, and more than 2 million illegal aliens returned in the last year from the United States to their countries of origin. So the message is very clear. And even if you ask illegal immigration, we have to concentrate or focus on legal immigration as well, because the UK is also struggling with hundreds of thousands net immigration annually. And I know that the last year was not so bad with this 200,000 plus net immigration, but it's not because the arrival of non-British people declined, but because the number of Brit people who left the islands increased significantly. So it's always a very important issue that besides illegal immigration, each nation has to focus on legal immigration as well.
Okay, Viktor, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.